Hello and welcome to another episode of Spec Steppin, where we are stepping through the web API spec. Today, we want to look at CSS font loading. Now, HTML and CSS has had the ability for a while to use custom fonts. Back in the old days, prior to the release of CSS 3, I believe it was, and HTML5, it could have been earlier than that, but roughly about that time we were only able to use a small subset of fonts on web applications because those were the fonts we were guaranteed was on every machine. If you tried to use another font, you may have weird results on the end user's machine because if that font's not loaded, the user agent makes its best guess, and you're not guaranteed what it's going to look like. So um, we also wanted the ability to basically make some creative and stylistic branding type choices on applications. You might have an application that has a certain type of font that's a part of your brand. And so having a custom font helps in that branding from your web application to your other products, your marketing, all that. So in comes the ability to do custom fonts. So now there's all sorts of resources out there, Adobe Fonts, Google Fonts, Font Squirrel, a bunch of them where you can load custom fonts into your application. Now, side note, make sure you have the permissions to do that. If it's a font that you need to purchase to be able to do it, make sure that you have made that purchase and are not trying to skirt around the issue to save a few bucks because that's illegal. Also, make sure you look at how you can use it. Some fonts are free on personal use, but you have to pay for commercial use. So just disclaimer, make sure you can use whatever font you're using. So in the case of mine, I actually pay for an Adobe subscription, so I downloaded a font from there. I sometimes use the Google fonts because a lot of those can be free to use and things like that. So you'll see that when we get to my application. Now, the why would you want to do this? So you can in CSS, you can put in the custom font using CSS, and it can load and you can use it and it's great. It works great. So it works really nice to make sure that you have the uh, style that you want in your typography. Here's the problem with it. One is it's another call to the server. Whenever we're building applications, we want to make sure that we are doing as much as we can to optimize performance. One of the ways we do that is try to reduce the number of calls from the client to the web server, because for every call that goes back and forth, that's time that it takes. Even on a fast, web or a fast internet connection, that's still a time, but there's a lot of places in our world that you're not guaranteed to be on the fastest internet connection, and it's just going to take time to go and spin that up if you have a bunch of files you're getting. So for example, you bring up the HTML, it has to go get the CSS, it has to go get the JavaScript, and if you have multiple files of those, it has to get all those, it has to get the images, and then it has to get files that your JavaScript and your CSS referencing, one of those being the font file. So it might have to get the web font and go to the server, get that and pull it in. So again, we want to make sure that we are as performant as possible. So where this comes into play from a performance standpoint and also from a user experience standpoint, maybe you've experienced this where you load a page up and you see the content, the text load, and you're starting to interact with it, read it, whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, something changes and the font changes and things move around on your screen because what has happened is the fallback font was loaded, and then it went and got the custom font and pulled it in and loaded that. So you were starting to interact with the page using the fallback font. As soon as it got the new font and brought it up, boom, thing changed and it loaded that custom font, and that's why things moved around. Kind of an annoyance, okay, and not really something we want to have happen. So we want to minimize that shifting of content if we can. So that's where something like this CSS font loading comes in. And so there's typical things, there's examples and interfaces and things like that and how you add it. But let me just kind of show you how it works. Let me just jump over to my code. So my code is pretty simplistic. Yeah, I just have a div here that I just have a classic custom font and I just have some text there. My style is just pulling in font family, custom font. If you've done custom fonts, this should look familiar. Usually the only difference is in a standard custom font via the CSS route, probably above this code, you'd have the information to load and create that font family here in the CSS. We're going to do it with JavaScript. So here in the JavaScript side of things, we have, let me go to my file here. See, I have this right here, this protest riot hyphen regular web font 2, along with my styles and index and all that in my JavaScript file. So I have that all here in my folder. So let me walk through this and just show you kind of how this is going to work. And then I'll show it to you in the browser. So first of all, I wrapped everything in a set timeout of 3 seconds. The only reason I did that is because I'm running locally. The font would have loaded immediately, that custom font, and you would not have seen one load and then the other load. So I just put in that set timeout to kind of simulate the network call to get the new font and that sort of thing. So when you're doing this in regular type of production type code, you wouldn't be doing that. So here I'm creating my font face object. So this would be equivalent to what you would do in CSS to create the new font face. So I called it custom font. This is just the JavaScript version. And I'm using the URL method to pull in my local. If you have it on another server or something, you can pull it in from a server, like your web server type thing. You can do that as well with an HTTPS call. Then I'm adding it to my documents font set. When your page loads, all the fonts kind of get loaded, the user agent, the CSS fonts and everything into the font set of the document. So what I'm doing is I'm going into the document, into my fonts, and I'm adding my custom font that I created right here into that list of fonts that can be used by the page. Then, because it's a custom font that I've added in using this font loading API, I then have access to some methods. One of them is I need to, I can load that font. So I add it in, but then I got to load it up so it can be used in the DOM. This returns a promise. So that's why I'm calling the then method. And then my function, and I'm going to actually do this a little differently because I prefer arrow functions personally. So, um, so then I have this function that runs after the font loads, where I'm just going and grabbing my font, my right here. I'm grabbing this piece right here, and then I'm saying, okay, change that style, that font family to custom font. And if I have any errors, it'll show up in the console log. So now I'll show you how this works in the browser in a second. But one thing, just a tip, I didn't do it in here, but if you're going to use this functionality to see when fonts are loaded or change fonts in and out or dynamically load fonts based on functionality, make sure that you have some fallback stuff. So for example, if I have this file right up here that I'm pulling from a server and something fails where maybe I'm offline or my network connection fails or what have you, you still want people to interact with your content. So have a fallback font for that purpose. And so let me jump over to my browser here. So this is the custom font, what it looks like. And so I'm just going to refresh. It's gonna take 3 seconds and then show that custom. So there's my regular font as it loads. And after 3 seconds, boom, it now loaded my font that is entitled Protest Riot Regular. So this is a way we can dynamically load fonts into an application to control programmatically our topography of a website application and therefore try to give the best performance and the best user experience to the end user. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, let me know, and happy coding.